TopMedTalk.
Nick Majerison here. This podcast contains information which younger listeners may find disturbing. However, we think it's important that awareness is raised around the world about this issue. Today's TopMedTalk is called the Grenfell Inquiry. It's presented by one of the founders of TopMedTalk, Martin Howe of Howe & Co., who represents families that were in Grenfell Tower on the night of the fire in 2017. It was presented at Dingle 2019, the 21st Current Controversies in Anaesthesia and Peri-Operative Medicine, and SIAA Autumn Congress. This is the third in a 3-part series. The full edit of this podcast will be out on Sunday.
So let's ask why. Why in London in 2017 a disaster of that type can take place? Should have been a kitchen fire. It was a kitchen fire. The policy adopted for high-rise buildings then, and still now, although it's very much under question, is a stay-put policy because of compartmentalisation. The idea is that if a fire breaks out in a flat, in a tower block, it will be contained within that flat. That's how it had been before, so they thought. That's fine if you don't wrap the building in highly combustible, flammable material. If I had a pan of petrol here and I threw a match onto it, that would catch light slower than the materials on the outside of Grenfell Tower. Also had a single staircase. Now, I've walked down the staircase in the shell of the building that's left. Tiny, narrow staircase. No alternative. There was no plan B for getting out of Grenfell Tower. When the local authority wrapped that building in flammable material, it was just a disaster waiting to happen. And it did. The refurbishment, the £10 million refurbishment that I mentioned at the very beginning of this, took place between 2012 and 2016. There had been modifications before that, but the major one was during this period. And critically, they put in new UPVC windows. There were gaps left in the windows. The windows had combustible, highly combustible material in them and supporting them, and the filler was highly combustible. If you remember back to the shot of the video of flat 16, you saw the flames coming out through the top right-hand corner there. It came out and it hit the insulation that stood behind the rain screen cladding, the shiny, new, smart-looking rain screen cladding. Not only was that happening, but the constructors, the people who put the stuff up on the outside, were meant to put fire blocks in. Many fire blocks either weren't there, or they put upside down, put in the wrong place. So you had a tunnel-like situation behind the cladding. And as soon as the fire got into the rain screen, it's a ACM, it's aluminium composite material in the middle of it with the highly flammable stuff. As soon as it hit that, there was no stopping this fire. Barbara Lane is the fire expert at the Grenfell Tower inquiry, the one that's been main expert, woman from Dublin, instructed by the inquiry to investigate and look into the causes. And this is what she said in her evidence. Primary responsibility for flame spread is Rainobond 55 PE, polythene core. That is the rain screen cladding. The fire was in the cladding by 1:08 a.m. If you remember, the first phone call was at 00:54, so it's very, very quickly out and into the cladding. Nothing could then stop it spreading around the building. It's her evidence that if those materials had been known about, the building should not have been occupied. It was not possible to mitigate that type of fire. That's why I say that building should not have been handed over in that condition. Maybe to sum it all up, once the fire entered the rain screen system outside flat 16 on the east elevation, the rain upon the rain screen cladding panel, coupled with the ventilation cavity, backed by the Celotex insulation or Kingspan insulation, incorporating defective vertical and horizontal side-rise fire-stopping material and missing cavity barriers around the window, failed to control the spread of fire and smoke. There were a whole host of reasons why this fire was unstoppable. But it's all involved and all about the outside envelope of the building. So the day after the fire, Prime Minister Theresa May announced a public inquiry. 72 people dead, over 70 injured. And Sir Martin Morbick has been appointed as a retired Court of Appeal judge, and he's the chair. He didn't start well, actually. He got down to the Grenfell Tower site, met very many distressed, angry, bereaved, injured residents and families from the area. And then told them that his inquiry would be over by the following Easter 2018. And that they wouldn't, they should be careful about what they hope for, that they might not get all that they hope for. That wasn't the way to start it. I'm glad to say that my firm and the other law firms that are involved in it made sure that he was made aware and is aware of the importance of this inquiry and of the need to do it completely and thoroughly. Now, there was no report by Easter of 2018. In fact, the proper hearings, didn't start until May 2018. So Morbick has split it into two phases. Phase 1, effectively being what happened on the night of the 14th of June. That has involved many of the bereaved families and residents coming and giving evidence, including Marcio, as you saw. That picture was from him at the inquiry giving his evidence. It's also involved many of the 400 plus firefighters who attended Grenfell Tower on that night. And I think only 2 members actually from Kensington and Chelsea have given evidence so far. We've also had expert evidence. So the people who appear in a public inquiry, and the purpose of a public inquiry is to find out what happened, to get at the truth. It's not to find any criminal responsibility, and it's not to find any damages or compensatory liability. It's just to get at the truth. And the purpose of it is to make recommendations so that we don't see this damn type of thing again. So the people who take part are called core participants. And you'll see there that there are 590 individual core participants. That includes members of families that obviously weren't there on the night, but are related to those who died. Now, I currently represent 13 people who died, and the families of 13 people. There are 20 commercial core participants. So the architects, the designers, the providers of the insulation, the providers of the rain screen cladding, the overall project managers, those type of people, they're all there, teamed up to their teeth in lawyers. There's 2 trade unions in there representing the fire brigades, and there's 7 public body core participants. Central government and local government do have answers, do have questions to answer here, particularly about regulation and the way this regulation has been deregulated. So as I said, the hearing started in December and September of 2017. Commemoration hearings took place in May 2018 and went on into June. We insisted that the inquiry opened with details of those who died. It was a battle to have that done. The inquiry team wanted half a day to talk about the 72 who died. It ended up going on for 3 weeks, quite rightly, and each family was given the opportunity to make sure that the voice of their loved ones who died is loud and clear in this inquiry. So phase one of the inquiry finished on the 12th of December last year, after 123 days of sittings with over 140 witnesses. Documentation in this case is enormous. Currently there are 665,000 documents. That's not pages, that's documents, and that's increasing. Now, Martin Morbig did not publish his report by Easter of 2018, but he will publish the Phase 1 report on the 30th of October. So I get to see it 3 days before it with families and residents who were there, clients, and 3 days later it'll be published. I hope it's hard-hitting. It should be. Then we are now into phase 2 of the inquiry, which is not what happened, but the more important question really, why did it happen? And I'm not going to go through all the things that have been looked at, but there's 13 identified issues that are to be dealt with over the next year and a half or so. And you can see it includes the construction, it includes governance and management. There was a tenants management organisation in there. The local authority had farmed off their responsibility, or attempted to farm off their responsibility to a tenant management organisation. But the two of them, I will ensure, are absolutely on the hook. The aftermath is the last thing we're looking at, because you might recall the response hospitals was fantastic. But the response on the ground leaves a lot to be desired. If it wasn't for the community rallying around and for volunteers coming in and helping, it would have been even worse. Families out of there, no place to live, not a stitch of clothing, obviously all their goods gone. And the emergency plan and package that ought to have kicked in just was missing. So that's going to be looked at. What next? Well, there will be recommendations made by this inquiry, and they will have worldwide impact. We are not talking about just what happens in London. It's what happens over here. It's what happened in Australia, happened in Hong Kong. There's been fires around the world, and everyone is looking to this inquiry to give them the guidance that's needed. The police are in the background on this as well. They have been carrying out an extensive investigation. It's the largest police investigation that has taken place. There have been 6 interviews under caution, but no arrests yet. And the police have now announced that they will have to wait until the end of the inquiry before they will make their decisions as to what will happen. Clearly, because there is evidence to be given and evidence to be gathered. But there is calls from the residents and the bereaved families that those responsible are properly held to account. I've seen the papers where costs were cut. For example, the rain screen cladding was changed from a zinc front, which was fire resistant, to an aluminium front, which is not, to save £293,000 in a £10 million project. So we need to know who made that decision and why, and who advised them. There's never been a corporate manslaughter case in the UK yet, but if there is going to be one, this is the case where people will be looking for it. Of course, then the families should be compensated for what happened to them. They are the victims here. So we've looked at damages claims in the UK And obviously we look immediately to the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea with their huge coffers that they sat on and didn't use to sort of help. We look to the Tenants Management Organisation. We look to the government and local government authorities. But we have launched proceedings in Philadelphia because the fridge freezer that caused the initial spark of this fire is manufactured by an American company. And as I said, you cannot have those type of fridge freezers in the US. You have to be metal back in the US, not plastic. The insulation, the Celotex insulation, cannot be used in the States on buildings over 10 meters because of its high combustibility. Yet they ship that over to Europe and elsewhere. And the rain screen cladding, similarly, cannot be put up on buildings in the US over a 10-meter height. But again, shipped out and marketed and sold here. So we've issued proceedings against them in their own backyard to hold them to account. And yes, damages can be larger in America. And yes, there can be punitive damages to stop these corporations, these greedy corporations, from spreading death and injury. And the proceedings are underway. There's a fight about jurisdiction. Should it be in America or should it be in London? There was a judgment earlier this week on disclosure, which is favourable for us, for the victims. And I hope that that does stay there, and I hope that it does become an iconic reminder to the corporate world that safety and life does matter. So I'll end now. There's a bit of a downer of a speech, but there is some good news. I spoke to you about Sean Talabi coming out the window on his rope and his family. Well, there you go. He had a baby son born on the anniversary day, actually, of the fire, exactly 1 year after it. And I'm very pleased to say that Noah has been to the hearings, and when his parents were giving evidence, very fine evidence, he made his lungs known to the judge and the rest. And I've also spoken to you about Marcio Gomez, who lost their son, 7 months in the womb, son Logan. Well, there you go. He had a daughter born on the 7th of September last year. So if there's goodness to come out of it, it's that life does go on. Thank you very much.
Nick Majerison here. You've just listened to the final part of our 3-part series, The Grenfell Inquiry. If you want to listen to the 2 previous episodes, you'll find them in the podcast feed. Go to TopMedTalk.com, or if you want to listen to the fuller version of the talk, it will be released on Sunday. Don't forget to check out TopMedTalk.com for more details on this podcast, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for listening.